Is this, guys, the next big injustice scandal? Allegations of blood on the government's hands as thousands of prisoners remain locked up despite the fact they've been serving time. I'm going to read into this more from Byline Times, you guys. Let's go. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with an article from Byline Times with the headline of the next big injustice scandal. Allegations of blood on the government's hands as thousands of prisoners remain locked up despite serving time. These are people still locked up who've served their sentence to fill 4 UK prisons, according to new figures. So while you guys are here, make sure you hit the like button and share across social media so other people are aware of this video, guys. So my initial thoughts is obviously there has been I have covered in different stories with regarding to the prison system. We've covered on Regan's News Round about what's happening with regards to women's prisons. We've covered past stories about how full the prison systems already are. And now we're looking at the possibility here, according to Byline Times here, the possibility of prisoners who have served their time but are still in prison. So I guess the first initial question is why? So why do we think that is? Well, my first thought that comes to mind is the lack of justices and a lack of parole boards in order to find out whether or not they're able to come back out of the system. And I think that's probably one of many reasons why some of them who are still behind bars, despite the fact that they served the time they've needed to. The other thing as well is that potentially some of them, despite they may have served their time, have they been rehabilitated? I talked on Regan's News Round, and I've talked before about how important rehabilitation matters when it comes to prisoners who are serving time, and I really do think that's important. That those who serve time and have, whether it's mental trouble, whatever their crime is, that when they come back out, that they are a different person and they're rehabilitated and they're not going back into a life of crime or in any way, shape or form, and they don't end up back in prison. But this might not be either of them, and it could just be a case that these prisoners are just there and they're being ignored and they're rotting away as well. So what do you guys honestly think? Well, let's find out. So almost 3,000 people are victims of one of the worst symptomatic errors of justice in the past 15 years, as they are still being held behind bars in UK prisons, despite having finished their sentences, in many cases over a decade ago. What? So we have potentially here, we have some people who have done their sentences still in prisons over 10 years past their sentence. 10 years. 10 years is a big chunk of your life, guys. 10 years is a huge chunk of your life. Wow, that's bad. That's really bad. The new data from the Ministry of Justice shows that 2,852 people given imprisonment for public protection IPP sentences, described as the single greatest stain on the UK's criminal justice system, are still in prison today, despite this type of indefinite sentence being abolished in 2012. Hundreds have now died while serving beyond their sentences, according to reform think tank the Institute of Now, the IOM, with the group dubbing it one of the most illegal scandals, destroying the lives of thousands unnecessarily filling prisons, costing taxpayers billions, and breaching British values and standards of law. Wow, this is really bad. The IPP was introduced in England and Wales in 2003 as part of the Criminal Justice Act, originally intended to protect people from dangerous offenders whose crimes did not merit a life sentence. The IPP offenders were at the time given indeterminate sentences with a minimum term to serve, after which they could be considered for release by the Parole Board. However, IPP was overused and eventually handed out to almost 10 times the expected number, many of whom were guilty of very minor crimes, and as a result the sentence was abolished in 2012. Yet the abolition was not made retrospective, meaning that all existing IPPs were still subject to their sentence and thousands remained in prison. Due to the difficulty for IPP prisoners to satisfy terms to be released and notoriously overbearing recall conditions, thousands of IPP prisoners have remained locked up after serving their sentence. This IPP thing sounds. I don't like this IPP thing at all. I can understand the fear and the concerns of people, of those who have pursued criminal acts, and the fear about them coming back out after what's happened. I totally understand that, but if they've done their sentence and if they've appeared, in my opinion, this is my opinion, if they have gone through a rehabilitation and they have been seen by the Parole Board to have learned from their mistakes and they're a different person, then they should be released. And if all that's then why hold them beyond their sentence? If all these things meet these requirements, if they're meeting all these requirements, why hold them up anymore? Why keep wasting taxpayers' money on keeping them in the prison cells if they don't need to be there anymore? Of the 2,552 of the IPP victims still in prison today, 1,227 of these have never been released on licence, and more than half of these have served 10 years over the original sentence, with some serving multiples of their original minimum term. These are enough IPP prisoners to fill more than 4 average-sized UK prisons, according to the IRN's analysis. Adding up to the number of years spent by the IPPs beyond their minimum term, it equates to more than over 100. I've almost said 100. 10,000 years. 10,000 years of people's times. And already said up in the article as well is that some people have died in prison, so they've not even been able to be released from prison and live out the remainder of their lives in freedom as well. Equivalent to a cost of £500 million to the UK taxpayer. £500 million. 500 million. 500 million. Think of what that 500 million could do for the British taxpayer, guys. Think about that. But far more than that is the personal loss to prisoners and their families. Yes. With so many in prison now beyond their minimum terms with low prospect of release, the cost of these overspent years is estimated to increase to over 1 billion by 2028. As an example, one current IPP victim is Thomas White. He was sentenced in 2012, just months before the IPP was abolished. For stealing a mobile phone, he has never been released from prison. In 12 years, Thomas has only met his son Caden once, and he has spent most of his time in solitary confinement. What? The guy steals a mobile phone and he's been in prison for 12 years? What? I'm sorry, this is BS. A mobile phone, 12 years, come on. This is outrageous. This is outrageous. Stealing a mobile phone. This isn't a rape crime here. White's sister Clara, like Caitlin and many family members of people given IPPs, has suffered severe emotional strain, witnesses her brother's mental health deteriorate over the years under the strain of an open-ended sentence with no clear route for release, according to the Institute of Now. The organisation said that as a result of this continued imprisonment, he has developed psychosis, borderline personality disorder and ADHD. His sister said this is a failure of the state to put a gross miscarriage of justice. The saddest thing for IPP families on the outside is that we trusted the government. They had a duty of care. They had a duty of care to look after my brother, and they didn't. They failed him. At least 88 people in the IPPs have already committed suicide in prison. That didn't need to happen. With the number feared to be much higher due to the difficulty of recording how many have killed themselves while on licence in the community. The IRN claims 1,600 additional instances of self-harm by IPP prisoners were recorded in the past 12 months alone. The sentences have faced overwhelming cross-party criticism, but with little signs of action so far. David Blunkett, the new Labour Home Secretary responsible for implementing the policy in 2003, is one of many voices from across the political divide calling on the government to fix what he called an unjust and immoral sentence. Speaking to a Parliament committee in 2021, international actors are also urging the UK to fix the IPP cycle of suffering. UN Special Rapporteur of Torture Alice Edwards described the policy as inhumane and degrading in a public statement in 2023. In 2017, before becoming the UK Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk KC described the IPP as unconstitutional and one of the greatest stains on the British justice system. He suggested the government had blood on its hands in failing to end the system. Yet critics say he has become the latest in a line of 10 justice ministers who have ignored expert advice on how to solve the IPP crisis, including rejecting strong recommendations by the House of Commons Justice Committee inquiry in 2023 to review IPP sentences. And former Conservative MP Sir John Major told an audience at the Old Bailey in May 2023, when the IPP was abolished, no action was taken to determine a just and definitive sentence for prisoners already serving for an intermediate time. This was an extraordinary omission. Lord Brown of Eton under Hayward, former Supreme Court Justice, writing to a forward to a report on the impact of those recalled under the IPP in March 2020, said, I have no hesitation in describing the continued aftermath of the ill-started IPP sentencing regime as the greatest single stain in our criminal justice system. Rory Stewart, the former UK Minister for State of Prisons, also told his Rest of Politics podcast in December that IPPs are fundamentally inhuman and completely in confrontation to the way that laws should work. Henry Rossi, a human rights campaigner of Foundation of Institute and Now, which is committed to abolishing the IPP, said that it is a systematic error, a form of state of violence which has no place for modern society. Far too many people, both prisoners and their families, have been subjected to psychological torture from this wicked sentence, which in many cases has led to suicides. Prisons are not the place to manage those that have served their time as punishment. The UK has blood in its hands and the government must urgently relook at this draconian sentence and release the post-tariff IPP prisoners with the appropriate support. Habi Sabi, a UK-based London human rights lawyer who has served on the Iran Tribunal, China Tribunal and Yugoslav Tribunal, added, political inheritor and a lack of focus to date stifled any chance of reform to IPP, as successive governments, despite acknowledging the IPP as a mistake, have demonstrated willful blindness and disproportionate risk aversion when faced the issue. The UK faces a mass public shaming on the world stage if this issue is not urgently addressed. A Ministry of Justice spokesperson said the government has reduced the number of unreleased IPP prisoners by 3/4 since the new IPP sentences were scrapped in 2012. The MOJ added that there have been a 12% in the last year alone, where the Parole Board deemed prisoners safe to release. The MOJ spokesperson has also added, we have taken decisive action to curtail licence period and to continue to help those still custody to progress towards release, including improving access to rehabilitation programs and mental health support. The Ministry disputes the notion that the costs of keeping the remaining IPP prisoners in custody is unnecessary. And officials played down the comments from the Lord Chancellor describing the sentence as a stain on our justice system, claiming that the mechanism is important for public protection. People serving on an IPP sentence in prison, whether not yet released or recalled following release, can only be released when the Patrol Board deems them safe. Yes, like I said, they need to be going through Patrol Board and Rehabilitation Centre. I agree on that part from the government's point of view that they do need to go through that process before being released. I do agree with the government on that. The MOJ claims but all but a small minority of these prisoners have at least one parole hearing to demonstrate they are safe for release, and they have not done so. The government claims that retrospective change in the sentence, which was lawful, past posed a risk to public protection. This is despite ministers are currently pushing through legislation to overturn nearly all the Horizon Post Office scandal convictions retrospectively. And the ministry pointed to HM Inspectorate of Probation review of IPPs last December, saying they found that the probation service is making proportionate and necessary decisions to recall the IPP offences on licences for public protection. As of the 31st of December 2023, there were 1,227 prisoners on IPP sentences who have never been released. There are around 6,000 when the sentence was abolished in 2012. Justice officials said the government has proposed new laws which will mean that offenders are automatically referred to a Patrol Board 3 years after their first release for the board to consider their ongoing licence should be terminated and ending their sentence. However, it is not clear when this legislation will be implemented. I'm very angry because there's the thing is that for me, guys, is that I understand why some people may feel that it is necessary for this law, because some of them fear some of these people. But someone there, just, I know it's only one example, but still, talking about a guy stealing a mobile freaking phone, and he's still 12 years, guys. 12 bloody years. Like, seriously? Like, I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand. I do think a lack of parole boards is one of the issues as well. But obviously they haven't introduced what they said at the end of the article there, saying that they won't implement the a parole board 3 years after their first release. Well, how many of these people, so many of these people, guys, who have served their sentences as well. The argument is obviously they're saying they're doing their bit, the government, but I'm not very hopeful of that, especially not of this Conservative government. But it does make you wonder. It really, really does. And for whatever you guys might think, Byline Times are one of the best out there when it comes to this, when it comes to news and journalism, guys. They really, really are. And this is as much as I applaud them for this scandal, it also really is disheartening that thousands of prisoners are remain still locked up despite serving their time. It is a gross miscarriage of justice if we still have people behind bars, despite the fact they have not been released. It is a great series of misinjustice. I don't know, perhaps they need to turn it into an ITV drama so that people will stand up and pay attention to it. So what do you make of this? What do you make of this story, this injustice scandal? Perhaps it's going to be bigger at some point. What should the government do? What should a Labour government do when they come into power? Let me know your thoughts about all of this in the comment section down below. If you can, hit the like button, be greatly appreciated. Share this across social media so other people are aware of it, and hit the bell notification icon so you'll be notified of when I upload another video. And if you want to financially support me, you can do so by becoming a YouTube member for as little as 99p, or joining me on Patreon for exclusive content. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.